Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Brian Knoll, your curriculum chair. You can see the names and photos of the facilitators up on the screen. In the interest of time, we're not going to do introductions right at the beginning because we have a pretty large group, but we will get into some breakout rooms a little bit later on. So you'll have a chance to do some introductions in smaller groups at that point. But this will allow you to see all the facilitators that have helped put this together and that will be helping to facilitate the breakout rooms as we get a little bit further along. So our session today is on anti-racism, equity, and curriculum. This is basically building upon the document that was sent out to you all last semester that the curriculum committee put together. So we're going to be looking at different strategies we can take to infuse anti-racism and equity based work in our curriculum and in our course content. So some of our goals for today, we want to better understand the intersectionality between anti-racism and equity-driven strategies and curriculum. With that, we're going to be looking at strategies both within our formal curriculum, our course outlines of record, as well as strategies that we can incorporate in our course content without doing formal curriculum revisions. So we're going to look at different options for each of those, and then we're going to talk about pros and cons of some of those as well. We're also going to collaborate to brainstorm how these strategies can be applied in your own courses. So it's really our hope that you leave the session today with some strategies that you can infuse into your courses right away this semester, going forward, things that won't take a year or so to implement. So with that, we're going to have some breakout rooms a little bit later on where we'll have a chance to talk in smaller groups and really start to strategize and brainstorm how we can make some changes right away that can help better our courses and really better the experience for our students. And obviously with that, we're sharing resources and ideas as well. So we do have some resources linked at the end of this presentation, and this will be available to you all after. And obviously feel free to share resources as we get to the breakout rooms and things as well, because we will have note takers during that time so we can capture that information. So we wanted to start with some things to consider, basically things we wanted to think about before we dive into anti-racism and equity work, both in our course content and our curriculum, to help frame what we're going to be doing today and hopefully the changes that you all will be making in your own courses. So this is definitely not an all-inclusive list, but just some of the things that we want you to consider and think about. So the first one is, where does bias, colonial language, things like that exist in my course content and curriculum currently? So it's important to understand where we have existing biases in our textbooks and our presentations, in the content itself, so we can start to weed those things out, or at least make sure we're addressing those biases when they do come to the front. So that's one aspect of it. And I think that's something a lot of us are thinking about. The second question, though, it's really thinking about the same topic, but from a little bit different perspective. And that's whose views, contributions, culture, history, etc., are missing from my course content and curriculum currently. So sometimes it's really easy to see the existing biases, but it's a little bit harder to realize that we have a certain cultural group or certain thing that's completely missing from our curriculum or from our course content. So we need to make sure that we're considering those gaps as well, so we can help to fill in some of those details and make sure that our students can see themselves in our curriculum. And then a third one that we'll look at as well is, how can content or subjects that do not traditionally engage equity and social justice topics begin to do so in a meaningful way? So there are certainly some disciplines that lend themselves to these topics a lot easier than others. So if you're in one of those content areas where it's harder to see that connection, how can we help to create some of that? So for example, my discipline is automotive technology. So that's definitely not one we traditionally think about engaging a lot of equity and social justice topics, but there are some ways to do that. So we'll give you some examples as we go through this today. And then also we'll have a chance to talk about those topics as we get into our breakout rooms a little bit later on as well. And then I'll turn it over to Amanda for the next couple of items.
But of course, there's a couple other considerations you need to be thinking about as you look to revise your course, whether it be at your individual syllabus level or at the course outline of record. And so these last two bullets are really hitting at the course outline of record, the official document that is kept within Socrates. So the first question to consider is, how soon do you want to implement these changes in the course? The curriculum process is quite efficient, but it can take a while. And so you might miss a catalog year. So for example, if you started making changes on your course outline of record right now, you might be able to sneak it in if you were very, very diligent in your work, but more than likely it would end up being in the next catalog. So there can be a lag time between when you make these changes and when the changes are actually official. And so that's really something to consider. If you want to make immediate change now, going through the course outline of record is perhaps not the best strategy. The second thing to consider is, has the department as a whole agreed upon the changes that will affect all sections? Because when you make changes to that course outline of record, that's the document that is for the entire course. So I teach anthropology and I teach several courses where there are multiple instructors. And so if I go and make a change on the course outline of record in Socrates, then all of the other faculty who are teaching that same course are going to need to follow the changes that I've put into place. So if you are trying to make more immediate changes, as well as changes that are ones that you've thought deeply about, perhaps, again, going through that course outline of record is not the best strategy. The last thing that I wanted to make clear, and this is not a bullet, but it's something that you should keep in the back of your head, is how major are the changes that you're going to be making to the course outline of record? It's something to consider because our courses are articulated outside of this college with the UC, the CSU, with CID and others. And so if you make major changes, you could be jeopardizing articulation. So if you are going to be making changes to that course outline of record to address social justice and equity, which is important, be sure to talk to Juana Este, our articulation officer, to get her guidance on that.
Thank you, Amanda. So as I mentioned earlier, our session today is really based on our anti-racism, equity, and curriculum handout that the curriculum committee created last semester and that was sent out to everyone via email. So this is just kind of a screenshot of that handout. And we have the handout linked here as well. So again, this presentation will be available to you all after the fact. So if you're looking for this later on, you'll have easy access to it. But what this handout was really designed to do was to provide some different equity-minded strategies that we'll be looking at today. This is certainly not an all-inclusive list. These are just some of the major topics that came to our minds. And then with each equity-minded strategy, we're looking at ways that we can implement those strategies without formal curriculum action. So what are the things that we can do today, tomorrow, next week, next month within our courses? And then also the changes that would actually require formal curriculum action. And again, those are the things that we need to make sure we have department agreement upon, because everyone has to teach the same course outline record. Those are also the changes that will take a little bit longer to implement. So as Amanda mentioned earlier, if you're making a change right now to a course outline, there's a potential it might not be effective until not this fall, but next fall. So it can take some time to make those things happen.
So what we're going to do over the next couple slides is we are going to go through the document category by category, and not only let you see it, but also talk through what our intention was when we were creating this. So what you see on the left is the strategy that we've come up with, and there are 5 that are represented on this document. And this one is adding additional current examples to curriculum. And these are all equity-minded strategies that we know will help students of color succeed in our courses. And so there's 2 columns to the right of that help you kind of break down what you can do in your class. On the first column, it's what you can do without formal curriculum action. So this does not require the curriculum committee at all. This is something that you can implement. Let's see, when do classes start? Saturday, if you'd like. And then the column on the far right are ones that would require formal curriculum action going through the curriculum committee. So in terms of adding current examples, there's lots of ways you could do this, right? Bringing it into your lecture, trying to add diverse perspectives to your existing course content, you know, rethinking examples that you use. The example that's given here is to utilize data related to the water crisis in Flint, Michigan in a statistics course, right? Those are all things that do not require formal curriculum action. But if you want to embed current examples into your course outline of record, the way that you might do that is by revising course topics or the hours to make sure that they are reflective of what you're actually doing in the class, perhaps demonstrating that the class would be flipped, right, in terms of your lecture content being done as homework and then students coming back when they are together in the classroom for more of the hands-on discussion-based ideas. So that's something that would require the actual curriculum revision to the course outline of record. Brian.
Thanks, Amanda. And one quick thing I'll add on this as well is in terms of the course topics, remember our course outline of records do have the course topics, the amount of time that's allotted to each one. So if you're thinking about changing up topics outside of the curriculum process, you can add some diverse perspectives. You can make sure you're connecting current events to course topics, but you still need to make sure you're staying within the course topics and hours that are allotted in the course outline of record. Otherwise, you're getting into that third column in terms of actually making a curriculum revision. So our next equity-minded strategy is revising the course structure to be more explicit in the inclusion of a lens aimed at anti-racism, equity, and/or social justice issues. So basically reframing the course a little bit. So again, we have examples of how to do that without formal curriculum action, as well as what would require formal curriculum action. So without formal curriculum action, you could include a statement within your syllabus and/or discuss with your students your course philosophy. So this is something I like to do in a lot of my courses on the first day is when I'm going over the syllabus and talking about the student learning outcomes and things like that. I really give the students my approach to the course and how I like to teach the course and why I frame it the way that I do. So this is an opportunity to incorporate some of those social justice issues if you choose to do so. And then the second one, they reframe approach to the topics and outcomes of the course with a specific lens on racial issues, socioeconomic issues, etc. So one example I've seen and heard about that would be a good example of this is English Writing 300. So I know there's a lot of English Writing 300 courses that are using specific textbooks to be able to incorporate these issues, like Just Mercy as an example. And then on the right-hand column, we had changes that require formal curriculum action. So an example related to this equity-minded strategy would be revising the course's catalog description to utilize more student-centered language. So now that we're reframing that course, making sure that our catalog description actually aligns with that, and using student-centered language that's easy for students to understand. A lot of times when we're writing catalog descriptions, syllabi, things like that, we're kind of writing it for ourselves, but really the student is the audience for it. So we want to make sure that the language is easy for them to understand.
The next area is related to the emphasis that you put within your course, especially related to the student learning outcomes. Without formal curriculum action, you could tailor your course objectives that are not explicitly stated in that course outline of record. Now, remember, one of the accreditation requirements is that we list our student learning outcomes as they exist in the course outline of record directly on your syllabus. But that doesn't mean that you can't have, say, sub-objectives that tie into other social justice or equity related topics that you're going to be covering in the class. You could also, whether it be in the course syllabus or the video or course introduction, you could reframe these student learning outcomes and put them in more student-centered language. These SLOs, like what Brian was saying related to the course description, is oftentimes written for us, but it's not us that needs to understand these, it's really the students. And so by telling students what we mean by the words that are used in those official student learning outcomes, that can really help them better understand what they're supposed to be learning. Now, of course, if you want to go in, revise, add, remove your student learning outcomes that are on the course outline of record, that of course is going to require the formal curriculum action.
All right, and then our next equity-minded strategy, rethinking assignments and assessments. So some examples there, using what we call transparent assignments. So transparent assignments are designed to be basically fully transparent for the students, so they're easy to understand. So clear instructions, clear expectations, clear rubrics, etc. So students understand exactly what it is that we're expecting of them, exactly what kind of results will equate to what sort of grade, that kind of thing. Making sure that new assignments are transparent assignments, and then also revising current assignments to fit this model. So I think we've all been in the situation where we think we gave our students very, very clear instructions that made sense to us. And then we turn the students loose on that assignment and it becomes very clear they have no idea what they're supposed to be doing. So the better our instructions are set up for them, the more effective the students can be in delivering for us. Create or revise assignments to encourage students to research, investigate, or analyze social justice issues connected to the course. This again is an area where you might be able to think outside the box a little bit to help tie some of these issues into your course. So one of the examples that we have listed there, having students discuss an article about racism within artificial intelligence technology. So that article is actually linked from here. And again, you'll all have access to this later on. But just as an example, again, I teach automotive technology. That's kind of a harder subject area to tie some of these things into sometimes. That particular article that's linked there, it actually talks about racism with an artificial technology related to self-driving vehicles. And that self-driving vehicles are better at identifying a white pedestrian than a pedestrian of color. So a perfect way to tie some of these topics into a discipline where they might not necessarily seem as obvious. And then incorporating active learning activities to help keep students engaged within the course content and provide additional opportunities for sharing unique perspectives. So we really want to hear our students' voices within our courses, and active learning activities are a great way to do that. And there's tons and tons of different active learning activities out there that you can incorporate. And then changes that require formal curriculum action. So revising the specific examples or constraints provided in the typical student assignments section of the course outline or record. Being aware of the language utilized there. So the typical student assignments section is really meant to be just that, typical student assignments. Depending on the course and depending on the department, sometimes that area is very, very specific. Sometimes it's much more vague. So the assignments that are used as examples there, we can make sure those fit with everything else that we're doing, but we also need to be careful about the language there. So in a lot of cases in that section, you'll see the term may used a lot, meaning we may use that particular assignment, we may use something different. In some cases, you'll see the term will, which means that that assignment is something that will be incorporated. So if your students have to write a 1,500 word essay, you would want to make sure that the term will is used. So that's an area where you might need some departmental discussion to make sure everyone's on the same page as well. So again, we all are required to teach the same course outline of record. So it's important that everyone can agree upon the information that's in there. And then our last equity-minded strategy relates to textbooks. So with this one, we're going to actually kind of model what we want you all to do as we break out into our breakout rooms. So when we get into breakout rooms, each breakout room is going to be tied to one of these equity-minded strategies that we've covered. And each room will have sort of a curriculum expert within that room, as well as one of our teaching and learning leads, or perhaps a few of them. And we're going to have a chance to discuss how we can implement this particular strategy or whatever strategy we're assigned into our own courses, and really have a chance to brainstorm and bounce ideas off of one another. And within each breakout room, either the TLL or the curriculum person will be taking some notes as well. So you'll all be able to see the notes up on the screen. So I'm going to kind of cover this one quickly, and then we'll switch over to the notes and we can have a little bit broader discussion about this, because this is one that we won't do as a separate breakout room. So we'll do this as a large group so you can all see what you're going to be doing in the smaller groups. So the equity-minded strategy in this case is changing textbooks or decolonizing your text to include reading from diverse authors. So again, thinking about what we can do outside of curriculum versus what we can do within curriculum. So outside of curriculum, we can pick a different textbook. So we can make sure our textbook includes diverse perspectives, greater representation, connections to race and social justice issues, etc. We could add additional reading other than just the textbook itself to tie into those issues as well. Another really great equity-minded strategy is to explore and perhaps adopt an OER, open educational resource. So there's more and more OERs every day. That can definitely help reduce financial barriers for our students and increase access and success. OERs basically equate to zero cost textbook for our students. So anytime we can reduce costs for students, that reduces barriers and has the opportunity to increase success. And then changes that require formal curriculum action, updating the representative textbook listed on the official course outline of record. And this is probably one of the most commonly misunderstood sections I see as folks deal with curriculum. it is a representative textbook or textbooks. So the textbook that's listed on the course outline record is just an example of a textbook that could be utilized to teach that particular course. It's not saying that that textbook must be used. So updating the representative textbook, that's a nice idea, but it's not a necessity in order to actually change the textbook that you're utilizing. One other quick thought I'll add into this in terms of kind of an equity-minded strategy to go along with this, and again, something that can be done without formal curriculum action. In my own department, one of the things that we've done for the last several years now is we've actually adopted a textbook that the entire department uses, and it's a comprehensive textbook that we're able to utilize for the majority of our courses. So that one individual textbook tends to be a little bit more expensive, but students can utilize it through multiple courses. We've all agreed that it works for our courses. So that helps to reduce the financial barrier to our students as well. So what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to switch up the screen share. So bear with us for just a minute while we do that. And we will get our notes page brought up. And then what we can do is kind of open it up to discussion so we can talk about some ideas related to this textbook strategy. So bear with me 1 second here while I get the screen share adjusted. So if everyone can see that, okay. So what we'll do is open it up to our attendees. If you have ideas on how you could implement this equity management strategy in your own course, feel free to raise your hand or enter them in the chat, or just jump in if no one else is talking.
And Brian, real quickly, this is Dan Dubray. Just as an example, when you were talking or reading off of the examples that are on the document, I was just typing those notes in. So after start notes here, those are the ideas that you had mentioned. Hopefully I encapsulated some of those ideas. So that's the idea when you're in the breakout session, is that the note taker can try to capture some of your ideas.
Something that we do, this is Timmery in nutrition, that for our class that is taught by multiple full-time and adjunct faculty, Nutrition 300, we adopt a single book, even though it's not a multi, like Brian, you were talking about a comprehensive text that would work for multiple classes. We just, for Nutrition 300, we have one text that all faculty use, so that if a student starts a class and doesn't finish or needs to retake, then it becomes much easier for them to just get right back to where they left off instead of having to purchase a different book. But soon, next fall, we are going to do an OER. So I am thrilled beyond belief about that. But the idea that I know in some areas, there are many people teaching the same course and they're all using different textbooks. So when it's possible, it's nice to have some consistency there for the students, because they come in and out sometimes of our courses.
Anyone else have some ideas or thoughts they want to share? Maybe some ideas you've implemented already, or things that you'd like to try in your course?
Yeah. This is Gabriel here. I don't know if can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think for me and probably for a lot of faculty, that the challenge is gonna be how to target or changes to curriculum to address the issues of the day, anti-racism, and in the era of George Floyd, specifically those groups most affected historically by racism and all of that. And so the challenge would be to be more targeted when we do our changes and target that population, right? Like African Americans, Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, the Latino, the historically represented groups, and not to just include different points for the sake of including different points and ignoring those groups. So I think that's a challenge, and I think that if we can be more targeted, we can address a lot of the issues of the day, like the lack of academic success in those historically underrepresented groups. Thanks for that. I just wanted to share that.
If I could add something just to piggyback off of that, Gabriel, too, as we were talking about how to think about this breakout session and before we go into our breakout session, I know we've stated diversifying the curriculum will help students of color succeed in the course. I also think the flip side of that is an important opportunity, almost an obligation, to expose our white privileged students to the contributions that people of color in different disciplines we have made, and change that white narrative, or the I'll just leave it at that, white narrative that exists, right? Like I feel like that's another side of the same coin, if that makes sense.
This is Hiram Jackson.
Go ahead, Hiram.
I just wanted to jump in that one aspect to maybe consider beyond explicit culture might be some issues of class. And so for myself, I'm a second generation college educated student, and I sort of recognize where I came into college sort of understanding a little more about the college academic culture. And for me, my career at CRC has been a series of eye-opening experiences in explaining really academic culture to students who didn't have my background. And as a quick example, like explaining why you don't plagiarize. For instance, and I've been dealing with this a little bit with the online assignments where students are directly copying something and saying, well, that's the correct answer, or that's, the correct idea, right? And why isn't it the right answer? And so I'm trying to explain, well, I need you to explain it in your own words. So to demonstrate that you understand it. I mean, there's that kind of dialogue that I am running into a lot that I think might be appropriate to some of these conversations. Just in other words, explaining the academic culture and why we do things this way in explicit detail where other people might take it for granted.
I have I don't know if it's a question, maybe question and comment. I don't know if faculty have ever thought about incorporating input from their students as they're building their course curriculum. Maybe you've already talked about this. I did join a little late, but what I have learned over the years is that our students are very smart, even though, like they may not know the specific discipline, but they're really creative in how they can help us figure out the best way to that we can convey that information to them. And so incorporating their ideas and how we might explain a particular concept to them. And to me, also oftentimes it brings in that culture, right? It's going to bring in their culture, because they'll say, well, in my culture or in my country, we, understand it this way. And then it pulls them in. And I also feel like it brings them agency and investment in their own learning. And so it might be against the rules in that because they want you to submit the syllabus by a certain time. But if you could hold back a little bit, allow the students to give you some input and then turn it in, I kind of see that as a benefit for both.
One strategy, Teresa, that adds to what Teresa was saying is doing a focus group after the semester, or as you're winding up, so that your materials for the next semester are also informed by your student experiences, where you ask them directly about what assignments really did they connect with. And you can use it obviously for a variety of reasons, but specifically asking students, picking students out to ask. You know, you all obviously you ask everybody for feedback, but then tapping several on the shoulder and saying, I really value your input and I'd like to hear from you. And so now with Zoom, that makes it even easier because you don't have to have them come onto campus and you can work around their schedule a little bit better. So that's always nice to be able to do in preparation for the following semester, because it does get so stressful ahead of time, you know, before the semester begins. And so trying to scramble. Now, at least we don't have this semester duplicating, you know, we would always have to get our jobs in early. We can still, I'm still making changes. Well, in one of my classes, the rest of them I've launched in Canvas, but that is just another strategy for specifically getting the voices heard. Before we go on, I want to go back to Dan. When you were taking notes for Lisa Marie's content, I think what's super important is that she said that it was about recognizing the contributions of people of color in the variety of disciplines, not, and that everybody obviously can benefit, including and specifically the students, not necessarily benefit, but the students with white privilege, that they need to be exposed to these contributions because that's part of.
Thank you for that summary, because you're right. So two things. I used to, when we were on ground, I would have, and this is something I took from the new faculty orientation. It was a little note that it would say, this is just to say. And then students used to be able to anonymously give me feedback about the class at the end of the semester that I would then implement in the next semester. The other part of that is in my managing diversity in the workforce class, we talk about various groups and you know, characteristics of diverse groups. And sometimes my white students would say, well, I don't know, I've never been discriminated against, or like, I can't relate, or I'm a white male, I don't know what gender bias is. And I would then turn it and say, well, then you know what privilege is. You know what entitlement is. Tell us about that. Right. So I always feel like we can't, like, the narrative needs to go both ways in order for us to kind of continuously drill in that a new perspective needs to be switched on for those who have benefited from privilege.
See that Kelsey has had her hand up, so go for it, Kelsey.
I just really loved what Teresa was saying about including the students in choosing materials. I think she was talking about the syllabus and policies and things like that as well. But one of the things I do in my women in literature class is I don't even put together a reading schedule before class starts. We come into class and I have a few readings for the first 2 weeks. But beyond that, we work together in those first 2 weeks to talk about what we want to read, and we have conversations about how those readings will represent diverse perspectives. And I let the students talk about their favorite authors, and we read some of those, and they become really invested in the selections, which helps them to really care about what we're reading and contribute to the conversations. And I'm trying to do that again this semester in the online environment, which has been really interesting. But we'll see how that goes. I've created a couple of little videos for us to start our discussions, and hopefully they will feel just as invested this time around.
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, just to echo what Kelsey was saying and Teresa's idea, I've done it before too. So it can be done. You have to let go a little, and you have to be willing to really listen to their interests. And, you know, I did this many, many moons ago in a face-to-face class, but now I could see really doing it with my class and stressing how do we get to the more of the social issues around infectious disease and, you know, the racial issues. So it was a fabulous experience, but definitely one where you have to let go a little and let them guide what you're going to be putting in that syllabus.
All right, thank you everyone for sharing all those excellent ideas, and you can see that Dan is taking notes for us. So what we're going to be doing is switching over to the breakout rooms in just a moment. For the breakout rooms, each breakout room will have an equity-minded strategy that they're going to be looking at, and we also have the questions to consider to think about there as well. So for you as attendees, you don't need to worry about where you're going. You're going to get pushed into a breakout room, and then each breakout room will have a curriculum person as well as a teaching and learning lead. Those people know what strategy your room is assigned. So with that, they will be helping to facilitate the discussion and then also taking notes. So we're going to go into breakout into those smaller rooms in just a moment to be able to discuss that. We'll have about 20 minutes in the breakout rooms is our plan, and you'll get some warnings before the breakout rooms go away. And then we'll come back together as a group to discuss some of the highlights of our conversations before we wrap up the session. So Amanda's going to start pushing you all to breakout rooms in just a moment.
Just to let everyone know, you are now being recorded again. So if you'd like to hide yourself, your image, you are more than welcome to do that. We don't take it personally around here.
Okay, so it looks like everyone has made their way back into the main room. So we just had this quote up here as just kind of a landing for us to make our way back into the main session. So what we'd like to do now is take a few minutes to just share some highlights from each of the breakout sessions. So I will switch up the screen share in just a moment and pull the notes page back up. And then if we can have some members from each of the sessions just share some of the highlights, maybe some of the best ideas that came out of each one, and then we can have a little bit more whole group discussion. For me, just a moment here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. So we'll start with our first group about additional current examples to your curriculum. Since we've got lots of stuff there. So so Brandon and Amanda were our facilitators for that one. So they may want to start sharing some ideas, but anyone else that was in that room, feel free to share ideas that came up as well.
So, so I think for me, what was really interesting in this discussion that we had was that the level at which the examples all came from the students. You know, a lot of folks were directly asking students to make connections between themselves and the content, as well as, you know, asking the students for their thoughts. I mean, I think that's kind of the bigger picture that I see coming out of this, is that we don't have to always be the source of the examples. The students can do that for us. The students can be the connection that we need. We just have to listen to them. We have to take that time to ask and listen to what the students are saying.
And one of the things that I wanted to mention about all of the things that we talked about in this session was none of them required formal curriculum action. Not one of them. They can all be implemented today, tomorrow, next week, but they don't require you going in and touching the course outline of record, which is really exciting.
Is there anything else anyone wants to add related to this equity-minded strategy about current examples and current events?
I think we talked about it too in our breakout, but I'm not sure if it's captured here. But the use of video content for students, everybody, you know, all the students are watching videos on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all that. And sometimes that feels a little more approachable to students. And it can be a good way to engage them rather than here's an article that would be great to read, which is excellent, but yeah.
Thank you for that. And it's not necessarily equity related exactly, but it's just something that came to my mind as you're mentioning that. For myself, being in a very hands-on discipline, one of the things I hear students talk about a lot is, well, you know, you can find videos on how to do anything on YouTube, which is very much true in a lot of ways. But, you know, we think about information literacy and being able to analyze good information versus bad. One of the things that I've kind of encouraged students to do is when they're looking at videos on YouTube, being able to really decipher between what is a good how-to versus maybe not a good how-to to follow. So really thinking about, you know, being good digital citizens and how we analyze the information that we're taking in. All right, so our next breakout room and next strategy was about revising course structure to be more explicit in the inclusion of a lens aimed at anti-racism, equity, and or social justice issues. So Drew and Kelsey were our facilitators for that one. So if they or anyone else that was in that breakout room wants to share some of the ideas that came up there.
I would love to have Professor Laporte or Sarah share what they said. I think they added some really excellent things. Do either of you want to speak up?
Sure. I had talked about teaching psychology of minorities for Psych City, and that there's only one textbook and it's a little dated. And so I have compensated by adding a lot of supplemental reading with current authors by journalists, activists, Ibram X. Kendi and Ijeoma Olio, and you know, wanting to integrate more and more and help things be current, because we have so much going on in our country, even as we speak right now. In fact, things are pretty escalated right now. You know, something that's published a few years ago may not be as meaningful as, you know, someone who is publishing things and talking about it right now on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, where our students are getting regular daily exposure to information. And so we can hand them stuff that's current and accurate and extremely relevant to their situation today. And that when we talk about equity, we want to focus not just on race, ethnicity, because that's usually where most people go first when they think about it, but also gender, sexual orientation, age, ability, and socioeconomic status, amongst other things, because there's so many other categories. So we want to be able to focus on that and bring that into the course discussion. And, you know, especially in psychology, I've got so many people coming in who, a good number that have a diagnosis for mental health. And you can't just look at someone and assume what they're coming into the classroom with. And we, for example, we might have someone who's seemingly cisgendered white male, and we might assume this person is the beacon of privilege. You know, when I was facilitating discussion in my classes last semester, I was very aware of this. I didn't want anyone who fit this picture of privilege to get scapegoated by the other students. I wanted the discussion space to be safe for everyone to feel included, everyone to feel that they can show up as themselves and be seen and heard. And, you know, there's so many things that could be happening for that student. The student might be closeted gay. The student might be coming from a working class background. We don't know. We don't want to just always make assumptions when we're looking at our students. The last thing we need to do is be discriminating or biased or, you know, leaning on stereotypes. Like the first few weeks I spend in that course is deconstructing stereotypes, I think for 3 weeks straight. So the more we can integrate current things in for students and include them in the discussions and appeal to them, again, not just with race, ethnicity, but gender and age and ability and everything else is really, really important.
That was great. Thank you for that. Anything else related to revising the course structure?
We talked a little bit about some of the challenges in courses that have a lot more content requirements, like I think Todd was talking about his anatomy and physiology class, and having some challenges in terms of finding ways to re-examine how to integrate some of these practices. But he was talking about, I don't know, Todd, do you want to talk yourself? I don't want to talk for you. But
yeah, I was
okay.
just mentioning reframing some of the topics and bringing the idea of social injustice and difficulties that some minorities might have in the healthcare field, where when you're just working with, say, the body and how the immune system works or the reproductive system, it sometimes can be a little bit difficult, but we can bring in topics. And I use the example of like infant mortality rate, how much higher it is in the minority population and lower socioeconomic population, and why that is and what we can do about just to start bringing awareness of that equality, and especially people that are entering into the healthcare field.
So hi, this is Jeanette. Just one suggestion as you were talking, Todd, I was thinking that can relate in terms of that dense content and trying to fit things in, right? Like so much to fit in, is that sometimes I use Canvas announcements for things like that. So maybe you can't quite fit in everything, but I'll use a Canvas announcement on a Wednesday that says, here's a statistic on infant mortality of African-American women when we're in the middle of a prenatal development, and it will be targeted. And it is nice because it's not, 20 pages of reading and that's one piece of it. You're actually highlighting that and then, open that up for like students to comment, or, like we can have conversation about that at office hours and, things like that. So it kind of puts a space to put highlighted and things that are important, almost like a ticker tape, if that makes sense.
And infographics can be really helpful as well. They are pretty engaging depending on how they're structured.
Those are all great ideas. Thank you. So we've got another topic here as well. So rethinking our areas of emphasis within the course and revising or translating SLOs into more student-friendly language. And we had Dan and Tim-Marie as our facilitators for that one, if you want to share some highlights.
Dan brought up an example of changing language, and this was a good example of something that could be done informally as well as formally. So he was talking about teaching cultural communications class and the wording that cultural and communication competence or competency versus cultural humility, because we all know you are never competent in a culture. No matter how much you study it, especially if it's not your own culture, what you were born into or what have you. So thinking about changing that wording in your own class documents is one thing, and when you discuss things in class, but you can go as far as actually changing that language in the SLO, with the official SLO through Socrates. So that's just one example. And then we had lots of different ideas related to that. And Scott was talking about leaving until, because like everyone had said when we started, the curriculum changes take time. So, but leaving those as whatever they are in the time being, but rewriting a version of the SLOs or translating it for students where it's more straightforward, more inviting, less intimidating. And the idea was brought up that often we use terms in the SLOs that is vocabulary the students would learn during the semester. So on the first day, it doesn't mean anything to them and it can be intimidating. So he's thinking about doing that and then just kind of giving a link to the official SLOs so that if, you know, it's technically fine, but to really translate them. And then Gabriel was talking, let's see, there's some, I don't want to just read for everybody. But again, to go back to the textbooks and that sometimes the SLOs are too general and the textbooks often don't reflect our students' experiences. They're always talking about, especially in Spanish, going to a vacation destination, you know, it's like, we can't relate to this. This doesn't make sense. Let's see if there's the additional readings. And Dr. Bird talked about a presentation that Jose Alfaro did about this morning. And I know he recorded that, but talking about labor-based grading, and she teaches cultural or public speaking. And we all, or many of us, think of assessing a speaker in a certain way and not necessarily valuing the cultural capital that they come into the course with. And then Teresa, the last idea was she likes to share with students other things she's reading that are outside of whatever she's teaching or connecting with them about, just to model the lifelong learning. And I do that a lot with my students as well. This is what I listened to when I was exercising or chopping vegetables in the kitchen or whatever. So you're modeling this and you're also pulling in different ideas and hobbies, and just gives them a perspective of wanting to continually learn. That's it.
Thank you.
If I could just add, one of the things that I also understood was to try to make our curriculum more worker-centered. You know, most of our students are workers. They're not really the type of student that goes to Stanford, or well, they don't go to Stanford or Harvard. They come here, they're working people. So have our curriculum be student-centered. You know, someone mentioned labor-based grading, even that, imagine that. But I think that, you know, putting my union hat, it's very important to do that, because those are the students that we are serving. And if we can do that in our curriculum, we could have a dramatic transformation in success rates, I think.
Thank you, Gabriel. I'll update the notes to make sure it reflects very clearly.
And then our last strategy was the rethinking assignments and assessments. And so we had a lot of discussion about transparency in assignments and some of the tools within Canvas to be able to help with that. So using the grading rubrics within Canvas so students understand what grade equates to what level of work. We also talked about really making sure we're clear about the purpose of the assignment. So sometimes it's very clear to us, but students may not understand why that assignment helps them to better understand the course content and what they're expected to get out of that assignment. We talked about giving the students some authority over the assignments and how they're structured and things like that. So we had quite a few different ideas, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time because I know we're getting close to the end here. I'm going to switch my screen share back to the main presentation for just a moment. So bear with me for 1 second. So at the end of our slide presentation, we do have some different resources linked here, and we will add some of the others that came up through the discussion as well. And then we also will have a link in here to that Google Doc that all the notes were taken on. So later on, everyone will have access to the recording, to the slide presentation, to all of these resources, and to all the notes that were gathered. So we want to thank you all for joining us today and sharing all the ideas that were shared. We really appreciate it. And hopefully you all got some good ideas that you can incorporate in your classes for this semester to help benefit our students and help increase our efforts towards anti-racism and equity.
Gabriel, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I was distracted, but I'm here.
Okay, no worries. I wanted to just make sure I captured the what you had said. So I changed it to make curriculum more student-centered, which includes textbooks, recognize and value their reality, which is worker-centered, so they find the content relatable and relevant.
Yeah, that works. Thanks.
Okay,
That's
excellent.
been better than what I said.
I knew what you were saying. Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks everybody for your input and your ideas. It's very helpful. It's great.